Hello, we are starting a new series of Bible Notes today. If you've been with us or were with us on Sunday, you'll have known Steve unpacked the start of a series called I Will Follow. And we're going to be spending quite a few weeks now going through some of what we call the Beatitudes, which is teaching in the book of Matthew, and looking at these verses in how they can help us in how we follow Jesus. It's as simple as that. It's a really exciting Sunday series. We're really looking forward to doing that and going through that together. And hopefully these Bible notes that we'll be producing as well will just give an added element to that and a bit more in-depth stuff from the Bible for us to use and apply in our lives. That's what we want to do, is help and equip each other in living out this life of following Jesus. So we're going to start today. There's two little bits of the Bible that we're going to use today. The first is the start of this teaching on the Beatitudes, which is Matthew 5, verses 1 to 3. And just to add some more to that, it's some verses in the book of James, which is James 4, 7 to 10 as well. But let me just read these first few verses of Matthew 5 as a start off. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." That's it. Those three verses just to get us started. And Matthew is really setting the scene for us. Jesus has seen there's crowds, he's seen there's people there, and he really wants to take the opportunity to speak God's truth whilst they're gathered. Yes, starting with the disciples and then with the wider crowd that had gathered. And I really like the fact Matthew tells us in verse 1, Jesus went up on the mountainside and he sat down. What a human thing to do. And it just made me think, normally, if someone is going to address a crowd, give a big speech, say something that's really important, normally we stand up, don't we? Not sit down. We stand up because we think that shows authority. It perhaps helps project voice so you can see people, or so people maybe can hear you easier. But Jesus sits down. And it made me think this is quite a posture change in how Jesus wants to be and how he wants to communicate. And it just made me think, by Jesus sitting down, what was he saying by that? To me, Matthew has put that in for a reason, for us to take something from it. It's not just going to be a throwaway comment. Jesus sat down. Jesus didn't want to be someone just standing in authority over these people. He wanted to sit and talk with the people. Yes, he is in authority, and we're not saying he isn't. But by that posture change of sitting down, Jesus wanted people to hear his heart. Jesus wanted people to talk with him, not just have him talk at them or talk to them, but to really engage with him, to see that Jesus was with them, that he wanted to speak with them on a level. I don't know about you, but I kind of thought if I was in the crowd and Jesus had come and, it's Jesus, you've heard about this guy, he's been going around, he's been healing people, I'd be like, wow, can't wait to hear what he's got to say. He sits down. I think I'd be thinking, I'm going to get comfortable now because we could be here a while. It could be perhaps Jesus sat down because he was tired. As I've just said, he'd been travelling around, he'd been healing the sick. In the chapter before Matthew takes us through Jesus being tempted in the wilderness, he'd been travelling in that time for 40 days without food, without water, had kind of been fasting, praying. He would have been weak at that point, probably, as we all know what we're like if we've been fasting for 40 days. He'd have been tired if he was travelling in the time after then, speaking to people, healing people. So maybe he just wanted to sit down because he was tired. But I think it just brings an amazing picture for us of what that scene must have looked like on the mountainside, surrounded by his disciples, surrounded by the crowd of people that just wanted to know who this Jesus guy was and what he had to say. And he sits down with them, talks with them, shares his heart with them. And then he goes into these incredible statements. And today we're just going to look at the first one. And just to help us in our understanding on this, what the meaning of this word blessed is in this context as it's written here. And for us to keep bearing this in mind as we're looking at these statements in Matthew. Blessed, it means that we're blessed in a spiritual way. It's not necessarily talking about blessed in a way that means we're prosperous in a human sense. This is talking about us being blessed and being prosperous and being wealthy in a spiritual sense. So if we're blessed, it means we're spiritually wealthy. It means we're spiritually prosperous. Okay, so let's just bear that in mind as we're looking through these things. It may change slightly in terms of its meaning, but that just gives us that kind of bar of what Jesus is talking about here. He is talking about the state of our hearts. He's talking about the state of our spirit, not things of earth, not the things of man, but the state of our spiritual well-being and our eternity. Okay, so in this first one, he says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Bit hard to get our head around, isn't it, sometimes, the way these things are written, the way they're said. Another way that we could look at this is instead of the word poor, is to use the word humble. So not poor in spirit, but humble in spirit. That really helped me when I was trying to get my head around this some years ago of what does that mean, being poor in spirit? Because it sounds quite negative, doesn't it? But when we look at it in that way, that idea of being humble, it means we have an understanding of where our spiritual standing is. We know we fall short. We know that without God, we cannot do anything. We cannot we cannot even think about an eternity, a life with Jesus without him. So we are blessed. We are spiritually wealthy, knowing that we are humble, poor in spirit. Again, it's talking about that same spirit, our spiritual sense, understanding that we are not fulfilled. Our spirit is not fulfilled without him. It's only fulfilled through what Jesus has done for us. There is nothing we can do that will fill our spirit, that will make us rich in spirit, if we want to use that language of poor in spirit. There is nothing we can do that will make us rich in spirit. It only comes from God. So recognizing that we are poor in spirit, recognizing that the only way our spirit is fulfilled is by relationship with him, is by all that Jesus has done for us. Our recognition of that, so that idea of humble perhaps helps us get our head around that. Being humble in spirit, we are then blessed spiritually, because we know only Jesus, only God can translate. Without God, we are spiritually empty. The Message translation puts it a different way. Blessed when at the end of your rope. I love that idea. And it just, again, another way of us thinking about this is when we come before God, it means we are aware that there is sin in our lives. We are aware that there is a hole there of stuff that we will do wrong, that we have done wrong. Not in a way to condemn ourselves or feel guilty, but in a way that means we understand that the only way that can be made right is by God. So we are poor because we are in want, because our spirit is in want, and the only way it can be fulfilled is because of God. Knowing we have this incredible need of God. The only way we can be complete is because of God. The only way we can be truly filled is by God. Our dependence is on him. Not on anything else, not on anything of this world, not on any other person. Only Jesus, only God can fill that hole. Only God can answer that dependence. And that means we become less. So again, it's coming back to this word humble. If that helps us in this, less of me, more of you, God. Less of me in my life and more of you in my life, God. And that is when, as the end of that verse says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That, when we recognize that gap within ourselves can only be fulfilled by God, that is when we can be a part of the kingdom of heaven, where it becomes a bigger part of our own lives. What does that mean? What does this idea of theirs is the kingdom of heaven mean? It means the gospel, the truth of Jesus, of who he is, of what he came to do, is in our hearts, not just in our ears, not just in our mind. So it's not just about understanding, it's not just about hearing. It means it's in our hearts. It means we live it out, and not just on this earth, but we can be part of the kingdom of heaven for eternity, forever. That we can be in God's presence on this earth and in heaven. That we are in and part of the kingdom of heaven. So, for us to be blessed in this way, for us to have this spiritual blessing and to receive the kingdom of heaven, we need to be humble and we need to submit ourselves to God, to recognize that only he can fill us, to recognize that it's about giving our whole selves to him, not just part. And this is where James 4 really comes in and helps us with this. So James 4, starting at verse 7, let me read this to you. Submit yourselves then to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Paul just unpacks there a little bit more for us what this idea of living humbly, of submitting ourselves to God, of recognizing our poorness in spirit. It means we draw near to God. It means we put God in his rightful place. It means we have a true idea and a true understanding of the condition of our hearts without him. And as Paul says there, as we come close, as we put God in his rightful place, he will lift us up. God will lift us. God will lift us above the storms we face. It may not take the storms away, but he will help us walk through them, because we will understand and we will be living out the fact that we are not complete without him. That God will help us, that God is there, both spiritually and in the things of this world, that his kingdom is here on earth as it is in heaven. And God wants to be walking with us and doing life with us, both here on earth as we will be in heaven. But it all starts with what our response to God is. When we come before him, do we give him the honour that he's due? Do we recognise the awesomeness of God and what that means? Do we acknowledge the impact he has on our lives? That we can only do what we can do because of him. As it says, John 15, that wonderful image of the vine and the branches. Apart from him, we can do nothing. We are connected, and it is only with him, through his pruning, through his help, that we can be all that he wants us to be. Can we be in this spiritually rich place? What an incredible thing for us to perhaps spend some time thinking on this week. If you're looking at the written notes that are attached to this, there's some questions there. Perhaps you want to delve a bit further. You could spend that time on your own reflecting, or give someone a ring, or meet up with someone, or in your life group, have a little talk through what does this mean? How do I live this out? but also not just about us being aware of this, but actually helping others be aware of this as well, showing others the love of God, showing others that what Jesus longs for more than anything is relationship with others, relationship with everyone, so that all can experience this spiritual richness, this blessed nature that is all about the condition of our hearts, so that we can all share in the kingdom of heaven. I hope that's been an encouragement to you to keep going, to keep pressing in to God, to be encouraged that He loves you, that He loves every single one of us, and just wants us to come before Him, to honour Him, to worship Him, and to do life with Him. Be encouraged. And I pray that you have a great week, a really blessed week, as we continue over these coming weeks to look at these incredible bits of what Jesus spoke in the Beatitudes. God bless, and we'll see you really soon.